And I was also aware that there was some other stuff that goes on out here that I was not aware of before, that there are other voices out here that communicate with you. The physical body is more than just flesh and bones, that it is literally the house of God. My name is Josie Thompson. I live in Brisbane, Australia. I have survived cancer a couple of times, and I've also experienced near-death experience a few times. And I'm here to tell the story. I had no idea what a near-death experience was until I had my first one. And my very first one occurred in 1991. I was 24 years old and I was super fit and very healthy. And I never drank, I never smoked. And all of a sudden I was diagnosed with cancer in my thyroid. So I had the first surgery, and then they realized what it was. They didn't realize it was cancer before the surgery. And because I was young and fit, I didn't, if you think about it, back in 1991, there wasn't a lot of cancer around in the world. When the results came in, the doctor said, okay, I don't know how to tell you this, but it is cancer, it is stage 3, and it is malignant. So we need to do a second surgery very quickly. So we were able to do that the next day. However, because I had lost so much blood, I was in intensive care and I was unconscious for about a week or so, just over a week. And that was when I had my first near-death experience. So before that, I'd never heard of it. I didn't know what it was. It wasn't relevant in my life. But all of a sudden, going through this process, being shocked into a new level of awareness in life as a cancer patient, and then having this out-of-body experience, everything changed. So that first near-death experience occurred, I think, the second day that I was in intensive care. And I was, physically my body was unconscious. And there were other people in the room. That my family was in the room, my mother, my father, my uncle, my sister, I think, was in the room as well. And I could, even though my body was unconscious, I could hear every conversation that was going on in the room. I could tell you where everyone was seated in the room. So there was a level of awareness that was awake, even though the body was not. And during this time, the signal on the machine went flat. So I had lost total, not just consciousness, but my vitals had stopped. And the nurses started to panic and they got the machine to revive me. But during that time, what happened was, even though I was unconscious, there was an aspect of my awareness that was perfectly awake, right? And it was floating up above the ceiling, looking down at my body. So I knew I was here looking at my body, and I knew I was there down here. So there was me here and there was me here. And I was aware of both of those. And there was no sense of panic, no sense of fear. I was perfectly serene, perfectly at peace. And I was just floating, watching all of this activity going on, perfectly aware of what was going on, but there was no judgment and there was no story going on in my head about what it meant. It was just pure observation. And then all of a sudden, this voice came in from the left-hand side. It was really big, booming male voice. And it said to me, "It's not your time yet." And straight away, I was back in my body and my vitals started working again. And then the very next day, I did not resume consciousness at this point. And then the very next day, because I was still so weak, exactly the same thing happened. The vitals went dead. I was up at the ceiling again, looking down at my body. And again, this voice came in and said, it's not your time yet. And so back into my body. And this time I did, eventually regain consciousness. But all of a sudden, I had this awareness of an experience that I was like, did that actually happen? Like, was that actually real? And I was quite afraid to talk about it because I thought people would think I was a bit loopy because I was on fairly strong drugs, right? And so they could have said, oh, look, this could have been a result of the morphine or some of the other drugs that were being pumped into my body. But when you have an experience like that, you can't not see it again. You can't forget it. Once you've seen something, you can't unsee it, right? Once you've heard something, you can't unhear it. And I knew it was real because I can't make that stuff up. And I was aware, like, how did this unconscious body know that my vitals had stopped? Like, how would I know that? And then wake up to tell that story. So it was clearly a very real lived experience, but all of a sudden now I was aware of this experience called a near-death experience. And I was also aware that there was some other stuff that goes on out here that I was not aware of before, that there are other voices out here that communicate with you, but we're not necessarily aware of them or tuned in for them as well. So that set me off on a quest. It was the birth of the seeker in me, where all of a sudden I wanted to ask bigger questions to find my own truth about what everything meant. Why did I get this? How did I get this? Why did I get it? How was I responsible? How did this happen to me? And more importantly, how do I get better now? So now I knew it wasn't just going to be my brain that I was going to rely on. There was this whole other realm of helpers that were also accessible to me that I could use on my path to healing. Who was that voice? I found out very many years later. So this experience for me happened in 1991 when I was 24 years old. So if I fast forward to 2010, on Christmas Eve 2009, I was diagnosed with a brain tumor. And I knew I had to have surgery. So the surgery was booked for the 28th of January 2010. Here in Australia, we have a public holiday on the 26th of January every year, and that's 2 days before my surgery. So after I got diagnosed in the December, I was having a conversation with a friend about it, and she said, you have to fly to Sydney and you have to go and see this spiritual healer. I organized a plane. I flew down to Sydney to spend 5 hours with this woman. Now, I didn't know what a spiritual healer was. I didn't know what a trans medium was. So what she does is she channels helpers and entities that through her body. And so she explained this to me. She said, look, I'm still in the room, but these people will talk through my body. So if at any point you get scared or you want to stop, you can just say stop. You can ask questions, but just know that I'm still in the room. And I was pretty skeptical. I said, okay, whatever, So she did this strange thing with her neck. And then all of a sudden, a voice came out of her body, and it was a doctor, and he gave me a whole lot of information, and that was nice. And then she came back into her body and she said, are you okay? I said, yep. she said, oh, there's somebody else that wants to talk to you. And I was like, yeah, whatever. And then she did this thing with her neck, and all of a sudden her body literally grew bigger in the seat. And I started holding onto my chair because I was a bit scared, you know. And then this big male booming voice came out of her body, and I recognized it straight away. And he started talking to me, and he was talking, and like, this woman did not know that I was having surgery 2 days later. She did not know about the tumor. She did not know about anything about my circumstance at all. And all of a sudden this voice started saying, in 2 days' time, you will be given a choice and you must decide. And he went on to say a whole lot of other things to me. But I immediately recognized that voice, because that was the voice that spoke to me in 1991. So anyway, he went on and said a few things, and then I stopped him and I said, can I ask a question? He said, yes. And I said, who are you? And he paused, and then he said, I am Archangel Gabriel. And straight away, all the hair on my body just stood up. It was like I knew it was him. And I had been connected to him when I was a child. And when I was a little girl, I used to always say, you know, my archangel sits here. You know, my angel sits here. And then it got to a point where I think I'd started school and people started making fun of me, you know, that doesn't exist. And I think I just forgot about it, you know, because too many people were mocking this idea of me having an angel that I believed in. And anyway, he came back, and all of a sudden, you know, this reconnection with Archangel Gabriel now has become part of my everyday life. I talk to Archangel Gabriel all the time, and I know that I have access to that connection, but not just with Archangel Gabriel, to many other, you know, entities and helpers. We all actually do. And if your listeners had any idea of the invisible army that is available to help them, they would never feel alone ever again. Advice, he basically said to me, look, in 2 days' time, you'll be given a choice, but you must decide. And I said, I don't understand. What are you saying? I don't understand what that means. And he said, look, in 2 days' time, you can decide whether you want to return home to my choir because you belong to my choir, or whether you stay on earth and your work commences in earnest. But you must decide. And I was like, oh, okay. And I still didn't know which way I was going to go. But I knew that either way I was going to be okay. So whether I survived that surgery, whether I opened my eyes again, I knew I would be okay. And that was very comforting to know. But I still didn't know which way I was going to go until I opened my eyes on the other side of surgery. So consciously, I didn't have awareness of which way I was going to go. But obviously, when I went into anesthetics, my soul made the decision. So when I was in this session with the spiritual healer, it was all about receiving messages from spirit. And so the first message was from an Asian doctor who was actually the doctor who invented Reiki. And he gave me a whole lot of advice. And as I said, this woman had no idea I was going into surgery. And this doctor said to me, you're going to be given a whole lot of choices in terms of treatment, and these are the ones you should consider, and these are the ones you should not. And that was very, very helpful. Then Archangel Gabriel came in, and then another little entity came in that was a little cherub angel. And that little cherub angel gave me a gift, and that gift was a broken shell. And one of the things that this spiritual healer could not have known is not only was I diagnosed with a brain tumor, I was also diagnosed with 3 separate lesions of bone cancer. And so this little cherub showed me this shell and said, "See this broken shell?" He said, "Your bones are like this and we're going to make them better." And handed me this shell that happened to be in this woman's office. And when I took it into surgery with me, and I asked the doctors, because I was instructed in that meeting to ask the doctors to strap it to my hand during the operation. And the other thing Archangel Gabriel said to me was, make sure you put your hand up when you go into surgery, because we're going to be holding your hand during the surgery. So I remembered to do that. And the doctors didn't even flinch at my request to put the shell on my hand. They looked at it to make sure there was no metals in it, and then they were fine. And so when I opened my eyes, I was like, okay, I've decided to stay. Okay, here we go. And then I guess the last NDE happened in 2023, last year. So I was in hospital receiving ketamine treatment for a neurological disorder. And unfortunately, the levels were not being monitored correctly. And so my body went into toxic shock. And as a consequence of that, I lost consciousness for a period of time. And I literally died again and had another near-death experience where, even though my body was totally unconscious, again, I was fully awake and aware in this other dimension, where I was able to witness this beautiful golden grid rising out of my body. And at the same time, I was aware of this pure white light, like a vortex, torus field vortex coming into the room, collecting this golden grid from my body. And I'm like, oh wow, hang on, is this my soul leaving my body? Am I dying here? And I said, wait, I actually interfered, and I said, I haven't said goodbye yet. And so here's my soul in suspension, and this light sort of sitting here, and an aspect of my awareness was able to leave that hospital room and go and find my father in the garden and say goodbye to him. I went and found my mother in the kitchen, said goodbye to her. I found my brother, found my sister, I found my 2 children. And then I came back into the room. I said, okay, I'm ready now. And then this whole other sequence of events occurred whereby that authority was taken away from me, and my body interfered and said, no, you're not the one who's going to decide. It's me that's going to decide. And all of a sudden I came back into body again. And then the next evening, I had a similar experience where I lost consciousness again. The soul grid came out of the body. The torus field came into the room, and it was just hovering, but it wasn't time. And then it just sort of came back, and I was back in body again. So I hadn't actually left, I guess I had left the 3D dimension, if you like, because I was in this other realm of awareness where I could see the white light, the torus field coming into the room to collect the soul. But I didn't actually leave that area to go and see, heaven or, other aspects of the quantum field. But it was wholly out of body into that in-between phase where the soul leaves the physical to go into the non-physical world. So that's what I became really aware of. And again, the thing that I want to stress is that even though all that was happening, there wasn't a sense of like fear or panic. Even though that first time I said, wait, I haven't said goodbye yet, that was more of a a practical thing that my soul clearly wanted to do. And somehow I was allowed to do that, which was interesting. But it was what I think was the biggest thing I got out of that experience was the fact that there was this other voice that actually rose out of my body that I had never heard before. And I now realize that this body is more than just flesh. You know, it's a vessel for housing our soul and life force energy for this lifetime. And if we actually appreciated that, if we actually really took that in and took responsibility for that, we would take far better care of our physical bodies than we do. You know, the rant that my body gave me was that, you know, you've pushed me, you've used me, you've abused me, you've exhausted me, you don't listen to me. I mean, all of that was true, you know, and so I've come back into conscious awareness with that wisdom and knowledge now that I will not abuse this physical body anymore, that this physical body is so critical to house that soul life force energy that we have that allows us to be alive, that allows us to enjoy this lifetime. And when we don't care for this physical body, we're basically disrespecting the creator that gives us life. Like, you wouldn't do that if you knew how important this physical body is. The physical body is more than just flesh and bones, that it is literally the house of God. You know, I've heard those words before when I used to go to church as a kid, but I never used to relate it as something that's personal, like it was something in heaven, you know, that one day we will all go to this house of Creator, whatever that is. But actually, you know what? You've heard that saying, as above, so below. We're born into physical form with heaven on earth. And the house of God is actually our body. And God is the soul force energy in our body that gives us life and gives us the ability to breathe and experience life every single day. So you've got to look after this house, because if you don't, your life force will die, and that's game over. So for me, that was the most important lesson that I got out of that last experience, that I have a newfound respect for this physical body, and I'm in a different relationship with my physical body now. I talk to it every day. I consult my body every day. Do you feel like eating this? What do you feel like doing? You know, what do you need right now? Instead of, I want to eat this, I want to drink this, I'm like, is this what you want? You know, and I get an answer straight away. The body has such intelligence, and it gives us feedback instantly. And if you think about our experience of life, our brain and our focus is very rarely right here, right now. It's either back there or over there somewhere, because the brain goes all over the place, yeah? But our body is always in present time. So if you want to know what's going on right now in this moment, ask your body, because your body will give you instant feedback. When something doesn't feel right, it's because it's not right. Your body doesn't have the same language in words that we use to communicate with each other, but your body will give you a feeling, a sensation, and that's information. And it's trying so hard to communicate with us every single day, but we don't understand the language of the body because it's a different language. We have to start attuning to those sensations in which the body communicates with us every day, because it's information. I get very sad about the wars in the world, and I do know that there is God in everything that happens in the world, even when it looks so ugly and frightening to all of us. there's more to what's happening than meets the eye. Everything, I believe, is coming to the surface so that we as humanity can bear witness to it and not turn away from it anymore. That we are not going to ignore these wars, that we are going to become much more conscious beings, and that we are going to vote as a humanity about the kind of future that we want to make a stand for. And unless that ugliness and that darkness is brought into the light, we won't know about it. We won't see it. So by seeing it, we can actually do something about it. And if we want peace in the world, we must make peace inside ourselves first. Stop judging everybody else and their wars. Make peace within yourself and become a force for peace and for love in this world. Your life, when you have a near-death experience, you can't go back to life before. Like, you can't go back to your reality of life before you had an experience like that. So as a consequence of that, I feel like my connection to soul and life force energy has definitely deepened. My association with the body is different now, and my connection to soul is different now. I relate to myself more as a soul energy rather than I'm Josie Thompson and this is the work I do. That's not who I am. So every day I meditate, and when I meditate, I have an opportunity to connect with spirit, and I ask if there's any message that I need for the day. And I get given a message every day. Sometimes it's about me, sometimes it's about things that are going on around the place. Oftentimes it's about things that I'm thinking about that I want clarity about. And so this morning, I'll share my morning page if you like. So this is my little journal. So today, what did it say to me? Okay, it says, every morning you need to think about how loved and how powerful and how important you are. And make sure you choose your health. The body is not the ultimate say-so. It's only a sounding board that picks up frequencies from the environment, especially your inside environment. The frequencies come from your mind and what you accept in. So when you change the frequency of your mind, you change the frequency of everything. You must be consistent. That's part of it. But that was pretty powerful, you know, and I think the big thing to take from that is that the way you think affects everything. It's an energy, and the body's picking up on that energy all the time. So whether you say the words out loud or whether you just think it, you still have the thought, and that energy is in the body. And even though you don't share it out there, your body is listening to every single thought you're having. So you need to be very discerning about the thoughts that you pay attention to. Yeah, because the body's listening and it will affect the body as well. The sense I get is that we are in the process of significant shifts and changes in consciousness. There is a quickening, an awakening occurring in consciousness. And as a consequence of that, there will be much disruption and there will be much chaos to navigate, because the systems that have supported or controlled or contained us for a significant amount of time are now reacting to this shift in consciousness. So things are going to get a little bit uncomfortable as we adjust. However, I believe that things will get a lot better, and we must continue to grow and evolve and rise in consciousness together, because that's where our power is.